There was a lawyer once. His name was Francis Scott Key. He penned a song, and I'm sure all of you are aware of it. You've heard it, you've seen it. It's in your hymnals, it's been played throughout churches, and it's called the National Anthem. It's our song as an American. We go, however, out to ball games and we go to church services. We stand, we sing the words of this song. And the words float over our minds and our lips. And we don't even realize what we're singing. Most of us memorized it as a child, but we've never really thought about what it means. Well, I'm going to tell you a story today. It's the story of Americans. Mr. Key was a lawyer in Baltimore. The colonies at this time was engaged in a vicious conflict with another country called Britain. Because of this conflict, they had accumulated prisoners on both sides. The American colonies had prisoners and the British had prisoners. The American government initiated the move. They went to the British and they said, "Let us negotiate for the release of our prisoners." They said, "We will send a man out to discuss this with you." You see, the American prisoners was offshore about 1,000 yards on British boats. They said, "We're going to send a man by the name of Francis Scott Key. He will come out and negotiate to see if we can make a mutual exchange." On the appointed day, a rowboat went out and he negotiated with the British. They reached a conclusion that men could be exchanged on a one-for-one basis. Francis Scott Key, jubilant with the fact that he'd been successful, went below, and what he found in the cargo hold, full of humanity. "Men," he said, "men, I got great news for you. Tonight you are free. Tonight I successfully negotiated your return to the American colonies," he said. "You will be taken out of this boat, out of this filth and garbage, and most of all, out of these chains." As he went back up aboard to arrange for their passage, the admiral said, "We have a slight problem. We will still honor our commitment to release these men, but after tonight, it will not matter." Francis Scott Key said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, Mr. Key, tonight we have laid an ultimatum upon the colonies. Your people will either lay down the colors of that flag that you think so much of, or you will see. For that fort right there, Fort Henry, we will remove it from the face of the earth." He said, "How are you going to do that?" He said, "Sir, if you will scan the horizon of the sea." And as he looked, he could see thousands of little dots. And he said, "That's the entire British war fleet." He said, "That's all of the gunpowder in the world. And it's being called upon to demolish that fort. It will be here within striking distance in a matter of a couple hours." He said, "The war is over. These men would be free anyway." He said, "Sir, you can't shell that fort. It's a large fort full of mainly women and children. A lot of old men." He said, "It's predominantly not a military fort." He said, "Don't worry about it. We left them with a way out." He said, "Do you see that flag way up there on the rampart. He said, we have told them that if they will lower that flag, the shelling will stop immediately, and we will know that they have surrendered, and you will be under British rule. Francis Scott Key went down below and told the men what was about to happen. They said, how many ships? He said, hundreds, maybe thousands. The ships got closer, and Francis Scott Key went back up to the top and said, men, I will shout down what's going on as we watch. And as twilight began to fall, and the haze hung over the ocean as it does at sunset, suddenly the British war fleet unleashed. He said the sound is deafening. There were so many guns that there was no reliefs in between. He said it was absolutely impossible to hear, to talk. He said suddenly the sky, although dark, was suddenly lit. Paces from down below, all he could hear was the men saying, tell us where the flag is. What have they done with our flag? Is the flag still flying over the rampart? Please tell us. 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours into the shelling, every time the bomb would explode and it would be close to the flag, they could see the flag in the illuminated red glare of that bomb. And Francis Scott Key would report down to the men, it's still up. It's not down, men. The admiral came and he said, your people is insane. He said, what's the matter with them? He said, don't they understand that this is an impossible situation? Francis Scott Key said he remembered what George Washington said. He said that the thing that sets the American Christian apart from all other people in the world is that he will die on his feet before he will live on his knees. The admiral said, we have now instructed all of the guns to focus on the rampart. We're going to take down that flag. We don't really understand something, though. Our reconnaissance tells us that that flag has been hit directly again and again and again, and yet it's still flying. We don't understand. He said, but now we're about to bring every gun for the next 3 hours to bear on that point. Francis Scott Key said that the barrage was unmerciful. All that he could hear was the men down below praying, God, keep that flag flying where we last saw it. Sunrise came. He said there was a heavy mist hanging over the land, but the rampart was tall enough, and there stood the flag, completely nondescript in shreds. The flagpole itself was in a crazy angle, but the flag was still at the top. Francis Scott Key went aboard and immediately went to Fort Henry to see what happened. What he found had happened is that flagpole and the flag had suffered repetitious direct hits, and when hit and fallen, men, fathers who knew what it meant for that flag to be on the ground, and although knowing that all the British guns was trained on them, walked over and held it up humanly until they died. Their bodies were removed and others took their place. Francis Scott Key said what held that flagpole in place at that unusual angle were the bodies of patriots. And so he penned this song. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we held at the twilight's last gleaming, or the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave for the land of the free and the home of the brave? The debt was demanded, and the price was paid. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we held at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight for the ramparts we watched were so gallantly screaming. The rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave over the land of the free and the home of the brave? Blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord. Psalms 33 and 12. God bless you all. Stay the course, keep the faith. I'll see my folks on the flip side.